Hi, and good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Harkdietz, and I am the Executive Director of PATH. On behalf of the Whole PATH organization, I want to welcome everyone to this conversation with three of Santa Barbara region's most influential and active lawmakers. They are working hard to deliver for the region during one of the most difficult times in our nation's history. Please welcome Congressman Salud Carbajal, State Senator Monique Limon, and Assemblymember Steve Bennett. I'm going to give a little intro to both before we go into the discussion. So Congressman Carbajal was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2016 after serving as a Santa Barbara County Supervisor for 12 years. The Congressman served 8 years in the United States Marine Corps Reserve, including active duty service during the Gulf War in 1992, where he was mobilized to Jacksonville, North Carolina. For State Senator Limon, we know she was recently elected to her position after serving 2 terms in the State Assembly. Prior to that, she served 2 terms on the Santa Barbara Unified School Board and was the Assistant Director for the McNair Scholars Program at the University of California, Santa Barbara, which I'm partial to since I also graduated from there. Finally, we have Assemblymember Steve Bennett, who joined the Assembly back in December after serving 20 years on the Ventura County Board of Supervisors. He also served 1 term on the Ventura City Council after teaching economics and American history to high school students for over 2 decades. So I'd like to thank you all for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with Congressman Carbajal. Congressman, can you give us a federal update, including the latest on how Congress is addressing homelessness and housing?
Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to. And thank you for your leadership with PATH. You've done an amazing job in helping lead the organization. I just want to recognize you for all your good work. And good evening to everyone. I'd like to start by thanking PATH for allowing me to be part of tonight's event. Thank you to my fellow panelists, Senator Limon and Assemblymember Bennett, for joining us as well. And most importantly, I would like to thank all of you at home that are watching tonight's program. The issues we will discuss today are some of the biggest problems our community is currently facing. The pandemic has caused immense financial strain on individuals in our community and across the country. Many of our neighbors continue to stress over the inability to pay rent and live in fear, not knowing how they will pay the months of back rent they've already incurred or owe. Others have spent the past few weeks concerned that unemployment benefits might run out and worry that they won't be able to cover the basic necessities, food, having a roof over their head. On top of that, issues facing members of our community experiencing homelessness during COVID-19 have become more complicated and daunting given the problems they face day to day. They've only intensified. If we expect to resolve the current issues affecting homelessness, housing, and unemployment, our first step must be to get a handle on this pandemic. To date, we need to mount a coordinated national strategy to make it possible for everyone to get a vaccine as soon as possible. With the American Rescue Plan signed into law by President Biden, we will soon have the funding for enhanced vaccine rollout and the capacity to make sure they are distributed equitably and promptly. Funding in the rescue plan includes over $20 billion to improve the administration and distribution of vaccines. It also includes $51 billion to scale up COVID-19 testing and contact tracing, mitigation, and deploy the Defense Production Act. Constituents have told me and my staff about their inability to pay rent or mortgage since the pandemic started. It is upsetting and disheartening to hear that people are living in fear of losing their home due to circumstances outside of their control. That is why I voted for the last relief package in December, which included $25 billion in emergency rental assistance to remedy those struggling to pay their current rent and help cover past rent that they owe as a result of this pandemic. The American Rescue Plan proposed by President Biden goes even further, setting aside an additional $27.5 billion in assistance to those unable to pay current or past rent due to COVID-19. This funding will only help ensure renters are able to pay their current and past owed rent, but guarantees that many of the small mom and pop landlords will receive much needed money they depend on to live as well. Beyond renters assistance, homeowners across the country are still struggling to pay their mortgage due to this pandemic. Homeowners are another group that have been overlooked. That is why I'm happy to share that $10 billion in mortgage assistance was included in the bill to help those who are struggling to pay their mortgages during this time. With many of the new problems we face day to day, we tend to forget about how those experiencing homelessness are being impacted by this pandemic. Beyond the normal issues that those experiencing homelessness endure, COVID has only made things much harder for them and harder for those in our community who serve them, which is why it was important for me and other members of Congress that additional funding was provided to address homelessness within our district and beyond. I was happy that $4.7 billion was included in the American Rescue Plan for state and local governments to provide supportive services for those experiencing homelessness. I know that community members continue to experience job loss, and we're concerned about unemployment insurance running out. It was imperative that Congress pass legislation before the March 14th deadline in order to prevent this, and I'm glad to say we delivered. With the passage of the American Rescue Plan, we were able to ensure unemployment benefits, including the extra $300 a week, will continue up to September 6th. In addition to that, we were able to secure a tax break of $10,200 for those who received unemployment benefits in 2020. They don't have to pay taxes on that amount. This tax break is crucial. Requiring many to pay such hefty amounts in taxes would only have harmed those individuals who are already in financial straits. Those are just some of the important things we in Congress have passed as of late to address the pandemic, housing, homelessness, and unemployment challenge. I strive to serve as a federal partner to organizations like PATH, who are doing great work to combat these issues in our community. Keep in mind that this American Rescue Plan will cut child poverty in half from 14 to 6%, and provides child tax credits and the earned income tax credit that should go a long way to bringing up millions of Americans out of poverty into a better way of life. Thank you again for having me today, and I look forward to answering your questions in a while. Thank you, Jennifer. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for supporting the American Rescue Plan. We very much appreciate your partnership in that. I'm going to go over to Senator Limon. Can you share with us what you're seeing now on the state level?
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, PATH, for having me. And at the state level, I think we're very grateful that we have federal partners and that we are seeing that there will be an influx of resources and support for the states that are coming up. However, in addition to what is coming to us from the federal government, we do have some assistance that's coming to us at the state level. Some of you followed SB 91. It allowed for, $2.6 billion in rental assistance. And the LAO estimates that the actual rent debt that we have in the state of California is approximately $400 million. And so we are, and this is residential. And so we are grateful that we are able to see some rent relief assistance coming in addition to what will be coming from the federal government. And we hope that this will expand to not just residential, but also commercial, because we know that folks are hurting on multiple levels as well. Additionally, SB 91 creates protections for tenants beyond those extended in AB 3088. Some of you are aware that I worked very closely to negotiate AB 3088 last year in 2020 to be able to provide some tenant relief for our communities. And so now that tenant relief is extended through June 30th of 2021. And that does include the current requirement that tenants pay approximately or at least 25% by the end of the moratorium. Additionally, the statewide application for this eviction relief and support is through housingiskey.com. And so we are grateful that we've had these local jurisdictions and partners. We know that local communities, Santa Barbara County has stepped up. We are seeing cities step up as well. And so we feel that with the federal, state, and local jurisdictions, we will be able to further support our community who is in great need. I have to tell you that over the last 12 months, it's been incredibly difficult, but to see the number of people that have reached out to our office needing support from the unemployment department has been, really overwhelming and really highlights the need that is out there. And that's, I think, an important aspect to this, that sometimes we can't fully capture the need because we can't see it. We sometimes, put numbers on it. But when you hear the voices and when you see the emails of what our constituents, what Californians, what folks in Santa Barbara are going through, it is very difficult. And I want to recognize that receiving the unemployment assistance has not been easy in California. We have had many imperfections. It has been incredibly challenging, but our offices, and I say our offices because I know Assemblymember Steve Bennett will also echo this, our offices are here to help constituents who are still struggling with the unemployment office. And we want to be an advocate. We can't always tell them who to give money to or how to give money, but we really can be another voice for our constituents in this area. We are grateful that $146 million was awarded to 51 local agencies to secure over 6,000 permanent housing units for individuals and families who are homeless. And Santa Barbara County will receive approximately $3.12 million to acquire office buildings to convert them into permanent housing with wraparound services. This is something that you should be looking out for. You will see more bills in this space. You will see more conversations, really where we can take existing structures and create a way for those to become housing opportunities, particularly for the unsheltered. I think that that's something that's particularly important. And the budget does include $1.75 billion to be able to purchase additional motels or develop short-term community mental health facilities. So you see a budget that is supporting the needs of our neediest in Santa Barbara County, but you also see a budget, I think, that has policies that are slightly more flexible and not as rigid as they have been in the past in terms of how to think about creating these housing opportunities for the unsheltered. We believe in housing first models. We know that it is critical. We're also aware that Santa Barbara County has not had a point in count in 2021 because of COVID, but we are looking at the 2020 point in count numbers to guide us, not to dictate everything, but certainly to guide us. We know that the issues are difficult in California when California has approximately 53% of the nation's unsheltered in this state. So we are very aware that we must do more, and you will see that not just reflected through the state budget, but also through legislation that's coming forward, in looking at emergency solutions, looking at housing models, but also trying to help our local communities achieve the goal of having more housing for the unsheltered, and also thinking about those that have the potential to soon become unsheltered given economic circumstances. So that's a little bit about what's going on at the state level, and I'm confident that Assemblymember Bennett will add a little more to that.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for your partnership in this crisis of housing and homelessness. And it's wonderful to see some things really coming online. Before I go to the Assembly member, I do want to remind everyone who's joined tonight that we will have time for Q&A. So please go ahead and use the chat feature. There's a Q&A feature there, and my colleague will be moderating that in a bit. But next, okay, Assembly member, can you share with us now what you're doing in the State Assembly? We're really eager to hear.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. I really appreciate being here, and I genuinely mean that. And so I thank PATH and for this invitation, and I thank you for your leadership of PATH. I've certainly learned good things about it since I've sort of inherited Santa Barbara County constituents since last November. I also just want to start out by saying I really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with Congressman Carbajal and Senator Limon. They have represented Santa Barbara really well over the years, but they've done a great job of helping me embrace the Santa Barbara community, and we are collaborating on many things. And this is one of the issues, for example, that we've been able to collaborate on. And so I want to say thank you to them for that. You know, in the short term time I've been in the Assembly, just January and February, we've already been able to pass an eviction moratorium to try to make sure people are not evicted, and that will continue on until next September. We also passed an essential rental assistance program, a couple of $1 billion available for rental assistance out there for people. So hopefully those are two initial big macro things that we've been able to get accomplished in the Assembly. Also, as Senator Limon has mentioned, working on the EDD, the unemployment insurance, it's an absolutely critical funding source for so many people right now in our community. And you talk about trying to keep people from homelessness. These checks are essential for many of these people, and trying to solve the EDD crisis is not easy, but our staffs are working night and day, really a lot of energy being put into that. So please, if you know people who need assistance with that, feel free to have them contact our offices and see if we can help them cut through that. In terms of specific things, I've written 2 bills that I look forward to getting passed in the legislature. One of them is one that deals with what I think is probably one of the largest sources of affordable housing in Ventura and Santa Barbara County, and that is our mobile home parks. And for years, mobile home parks have been a great resource for people. And one of the things that makes them affordable are the rent control or rent stabilization ordinances that we have passed. And there is a loophole there. The Attorney General years ago came up with a ruling that would have banned the mobile home park owners are buying the coaches or the manufactured homes when they become available. And then when the owner themselves owns the home, they are claiming that they're exempt from the rent control ordinances, et cetera, that for vacancy decontrol that are out there. And the Attorney General ruled that that wasn't the case, but we've just found out that because it hasn't been clarified by the legislature, nobody is enforcing that rule. And so I have an action that I think will really help make sure, because if park owners are able to get the majority of the spots in their park, if they're able to buy them, we lose control of rent control in those parks. So that's one bill. And another bill, and I'm really happy this bill came from Cassie Roach with the Safe Parking Program of New Beginnings. But she alerted us that driver's license for homeless individuals are a challenge for them to get and pay for, et cetera. And they certainly know they have 260 members of the Santa Barbara community are living inside their vehicles. And so we're pushing a bill to waive that driver's license fee for those homeless individuals. And then the final thing that I think I just want to get on the radar screen is from Ventura County, but it's something I did just in the last 2 weeks. We spent 2 years on it, but it's in the last 2 weeks before I left that I think might be informative for Santa Barbara County dealing with homelessness. We had a large number of people living in their vehicles, in their campers, and most of them, quite frankly, were older campers. And they were starting to park along the side of the road in the county unincorporated area. It started with the financial crisis that we had. And then with COVID in March, it really started to expand. And I'm sorry, it started with the fires and then expanded with COVID. And so pretty soon we had lots of people really clamoring for us to do no parking and roust all of those people that were camping there. And I really thought that wasn't the appropriate thing to do. I resisted that. And instead, what we came up with was a no parking overnight without a permit. And the way you could get a permit is by signing up with our homeless resource program and cooperating with them so that we were able to access the people in these campers, particularly ones with children, families, et cetera, and try to get them resources. And it's really helped. It's stabilized the situation there. We now have good coordination with people. We were able to help get them COVID shots and other things that you would do with homeless people. So it's an example of how I would try to approach this, which is resist sort of the first cry. And we had over 1,000 signatures on a petition saying, make this no parking. But we have to, I think, be bolder and more generous as we try to address this very challenging homeless problem. So thank you very much for giving us this time to both introduce myself and share what we're doing up here. And I look forward to the rest of the evening here with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Assemblymember. And as a service provider, we're very grateful for the recognition that individuals need services, not just always just no parking. So now I'd love to pass it off to my colleague, Tessa Madden-Storm. She's going to lead the group discussion. Tessa is our regional director of PATH Santa Barbara, and she's been leading our program efforts in Santa Barbara County since opening in 2015.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. Really appreciate you all being here with us to have this conversation tonight. Thank you for sharing what's going on at the federal and state level. It's so important to the work that kind of we do on the ground. And I'm happy to be moderating the Q&A tonight. So I'm going to start with some questions that have actually came in ahead of time. And I'll kind of let you all decide who wants to take that. I might nod some over to one or both of you, and as they just kind of come in here. So first we have a question around really something you guys all touched on in your comments, just around the current events and COVID related policies, and how do we prevent a wave of homelessness and housing insecurity when the public health emergency declaration is lifted and the federal and state eviction moratoriums expire? Congressman, do you want to start us off with that one?
Well, first of all, the American Rescue Plan and previous economic relief packages provided funding to make sure that we are tending and addressing the needs of houseless, homeless individuals. Also providing support for agencies like PATH and others so that we can provide for that safety net. I don't think we should in no way forget that the homeless are some of the individuals that were hardest hit. And we need to make sure that the continuum of care continues for them, whether it's mental health, substance abuse assistance, but more importantly, housing. We need to make sure that we are providing for housing options and opportunities for those individuals that are houseless. And we need to get more creative. This is a partnership between state, local government, and the federal government. We're all providing different funding streams, different program opportunities, different grants. But I think what really needs to happen is we all need to be working together with our local elected officials to make sure that we're coming up with a good plan to maximize the resources and to really put together a plan that is working. I know the County of Santa Barbara and the cities have just come together to actually put in place some planning efforts and plans that hopefully will go a long way in addressing the needs of the homeless in the weeks and months to come in light of this pandemic. But first, we got to get out of the pandemic and make sure that we are now not leaving anybody behind, that we are providing for those support systems and housing to those that are homeless and in that circumstance. But as we transition out, we cannot forget that we should not assume and forget that things are not going to be hunky-dory. They're going to continue to be challenges, and we need to make sure we step up and make sure that we're all working together, and that all the resources, with everything the state is providing, the federal government and the locals, we have to be smart and strategic about it. Because I think we never have intended to fail as government, but I think we failed to strategically plan. And I think we could do a better job always. So my hope is that we continue to work collaboratively. And I'm just so glad that I have two amazing colleagues, Senator Limon and Assemblymember Bennett. You know, we're good friends, we're colleagues. We can pick up the phone and talk to each other, whatever the issue is, and see if there's some synergy or collaborative approach that we can take on any issue. And I think that's not the case in every community. I can honestly tell you, there's no territory, there's no turf, there's no egos. We all just want to work together to make things happen. And I think I'm extremely lucky to have them as partners.
Thanks so much, Congressman. I think we're extremely lucky to have all of you all on this call with us tonight, kind of talking through solutions and problem solvers, and having you all represent our constituents and our community in elected office. So Senator and Assemblymember, do you guys have anything to add on that question around preventing homelessness once these moratoriums expire? I know you guys are working in partnership, and so much is going on at the state level as well.
I mean, what I will say is that is, the rent relief is intended to prevent homelessness. That is what the rent relief is for. And so I don't want that to be lost, that, you know, part of the conversations and the very, investments that are being made at the federal level and at the state level are really around the idea that if we help and assist with rent relief, this will prevent homelessness well after the June 30th moratorium. And so that is the hope. I also feel that it's important to recognize that at the state level, we will continue to revisit these policies. You have a date of June 30th. A few months ago, you had a date of December 31st, January 31st. And I think that that's where we're at. We are playing the role of monitoring the situation, looking at what's happening in our community to understand whether or not these moratoriums need to be extended, whether they're done, and with the impact that the rent relief will have. So I think that will be important. And the longer conversations and the long-term solutions for homelessness, I think, are multifaceted. And I know that PATH has had many of them, but those including, looking at permanent housing, housing first models, looking at mental health support, job placement, the list goes on in terms of what we can do to prevent homelessness in the long term.
I'll jump and I'll try to just hit a few things that haven't been said. And I really will focus on what do we do when at some point in time we'll be done and there won't be moratoriums and there, all of that. What do we do in that situation? Well, one is I think we need to make sure that the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan that the federal government has come up with, that really, we really need that to jumpstart this economy and get things going again, so that we have as healthy economy as possible, and people that want to work and can work are able to get back at it. But the other thing I'd like to just get on past radar screen is here in Sacramento, I'm trying to modify the conversation about housing and have it focus much more on affordable housing. And I really would hope that organizations like PATH would join me in, this is my belief, and that is I think that the market rate developers are using the affordable housing crisis to justify greasing the skids for their ability to build more market rate housing, when then that won't solve the problem for homelessness at all. You could build an awful lot of market rate housing and not hardly make a dent in the affordable housing side of it. So overall, I'd like to change that conversation and come up with specific projects that are truly affordable and affordable for the current population that lives in a community. That's what I think is the long-term solution to the homeless problem that we have.
Thank you so much, Assembly members. So building on that, actually, we had a question come in just around affordable housing and how do we work together to develop more affordable housing options throughout the state and throughout our Santa Barbara community districts. Congressman, you want to start us off again?
Sure. Well, you know, the affordable housing in our communities across the country, 80 to 90% of it has been made possible by one thing more than any other stream of funding. It's the low income housing tax credit. And the federal government continues to make that available, and we need to make it even more robust. And certainly that's above and beyond all the continued funding that we provide, CDBG funding, home funding, Section 8 voucher funding, veterans vouchers. We need to make sure that we continue to provide those housing programs. But again, I will say that the private sector steps up with the low-income housing tax credit, a program that exists, but we can always do better. I served as a county supervisor, and I will tell you the partnerships we had with the local nonprofits, the private sector, bringing together all those different funding streams is really what made housing possible in our communities. Making sure we're putting inclusionary local government policies that really create the supply of affordable housing and workforce housing is what needs to get done. The funding is one thing, but you need locals that are committed to making it all come together. And local government, Supervisor Bennett and myself served in county government, and Senator Monique Limon served as a school board member. And being able to see policies implemented locally reminds us that that's really where it's at. Bringing all the partners and all the funding streams and making sure that our local policies reflect the type of housing options and supply that we want in our communities, and working through all those challenges that exist. Quite frankly, the NIMBY world is one of the things we need to overcome. How do we work with communities so they feel that the character of their communities isn't going to change, but get their buy-in and commitment towards the solution of trying to come up with innovative ways and housing that's appropriate to provide housing options for as many people in our communities as possible. So that's what I think needs to happen and how we can do it.
You know,
and I will add from the state's perspective, I think there's a few elements that could be helpful. I think Congressmember Carbajal talked a little bit about what, ways that we can support affordable housing once it's built, but also in terms of building affordable housing. In the state legislature, I served on the Housing and Community Development Committee for 4 years, and I can tell you that there's a myriad of really different solutions that are put forward, including reestablishing a form of redevelopment. We had RDA funds for our local communities, and those went away. And so we've now looked at ways from the state perspective that we could really focus a new RDA program that is on affordable, moderate income housing. And so we know that cities and counties will need to find pockets of financial, sources that will allow them to really think about how you can build. And so that this is multifaceted, right? You have the building, but you also have keeping them affordable. And I think that that's one way. I know that at the state level currently, we're also looking at alternative models, right? So you heard me talk about in my opening a little bit about how we are taking some funding to try to buy motels in order to house folks who are unsheltered. But if we extend that model to buying other places, helping local communities, right? by other structures and facilities that would allow for some additional creativity in terms of what housing looks like. So I think that those are a couple things that the state is looking at, in addition to, of course, tax credits that are coming from the federal government.
Wonderful. And I think you bring up a real good point. And Assemblymember, I don't mean to cut you off, and you can have the floor, but I think we had a really great follow-up question that goes right along with that around the status of the home key funds that you mentioned, Senator, and the immediate action requested by the governor. And how can we all and the folks tuning into this really best advocate for the legislature to act now and support those efforts?
Well, first, let me I'll just mention two things about the original question, and then I'm certainly will jump onto the second question. And that is, I'd just like to point out that, resources are really what has been used by, as I go back to the market rate developers, they say, oh, we can't afford to build affordable housing. Well, if you're just giving up, if that's what you're going to say, hey, we can't afford to build affordable, we have to find a way to afford to build affordable housing. That's what all the other first world countries that have done so much better job at this than we have. So you don't see the homeless crisis that we are seeing, particularly on the whole West Coast here, in other countries, because they have committed the resources at the national level. And I remember back in the 1960s, there was a major commitment to building the affordable housing that we needed to have built. And that funding level continued into the 70s, and by the 80s, that funding level has been cut, and we simply at the national level don't come up with those resources. I'm certainly not trying to throw it all on Congressman Carbajal, but we have to recognize that only the federal government can come up with the massive resources, and they can run a deficit. They have just better ways to manage that. And if we can come up with trillions and trillions of dollars for these long wars in Afghanistan, et cetera, and we can't come up with $1 trillion for homelessness, we just have to recognize we're going to be always just trying to catch up until we get this country recommitted to trying to say, hey, reasonably priced affordable housing is a right. That's what it is in so many other countries. So that's my soapbox in terms of that. The other side of that in terms. So when you say, what do we have to do to mobilize the legislature? I'm saying what we have to do in the legislature is we have to help mobilize a national commitment out there to recognize we're just not going to get it done. I feel like it's like whack-a-mole. Imagine if Santa Barbara did do a great job and housed all of their homeless people. Well, what would happen? The homeless people from Ventura would move to Santa Barbara, right, in that situation. And that's one of the resistance points that we see out there. So we have to do it at a larger scale. We have to say, wherever you live in America, a right to a reasonable home is one that we're going to find some way to get to you. And that would be, certainly a key way to be able to do that. In terms of mobilizing the current legislature, on issues, always, that advocacy is the key, finding, where the key pressure points are. But I would hope you would join in an effort that I'm going to push on, which is to try to make it affordable housing, or let the private sector take care of the market rate housing right now. Let's get the affordable housing crisis done. And I think that's a message that it has potential to really expand in the state legislature.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your leadership in those answers, Assemblymember. Before we go to the next questions, I want to say goodbye and thank the Congressman. He has important voting duties on the floor that he needs to attend to. So I'll let him say a quick goodbye to everyone, and then we'll move on with our state representatives with a few more questions.
He's going to vote on that $1 trillion housing bill, aren't you? Right? Yeah.
We're voting on a number of things, but Tessa and Jennifer and my colleagues, Senator Limon, Assemblymember, it's been great joining you tonight on this very important topic. But let me just say, I was looking at the chat and I appreciated Assemblymember Bennett's somewhat observations of the federal government's role and abilities. But, you know, it means dealing with homelessness and getting people out of poverty means exactly that, putting together policies that do that, raising the minimum wage, providing more childcare so families and especially single parents can live healthier and better quality of life and have better access to housing, food security. All of those issues are other types of legislative policy issues that we need to pass in addition to housing, because then that helps shore up the safety net so that people could stay out of homelessness. It's not just a housing. It's not like people wake up one day and say, I want to be homeless or I like being homeless. It's because every resource and support network that they need to help them stay afloat is taken out of them like a rug. And we need to make sure that comprehensively and holistically, we're being mindful of how we can lift people out of poverty and help them have housing options, but all the support that they need. So points well taken. Thank you very much for letting me join you. I got to go run and vote.
Thank you, Congressman. So appreciate you being with us tonight. So we'll take just a couple more questions for our state representatives. So I wanted to, I know we've talked a lot about housing and homelessness, but as the Congressman just touched on, you know, homelessness is the product of a number of different social issues. And I know we wanted to touch a little bit on employment tonight. So, you know, what have you all learned during this crisis about kind of the changes needed in our state unemployment system? And what have you all been advocating for as part of this, this crisis?
I'm happy to jump if you want, Monique, just to page to page. And you know, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that we don't have proper oversight, particularly of the complicated computer implemented systems here in the state of California. It's over and over again you hear about this. You know, first it was you know, the driver's license and, you know, all the issues there. Then it just goes to the, you know, one issue after another. So we have to have a better oversight, and I'm committed to trying to find a way for us to have a better oversight. To hear that EDD had a recommendation 10 years ago about a fix that they didn't do, and nothing happened. I mean, that there ought to be quarterly, you know, reports. Where are you with this technology now? What is the latest recommendation, et cetera? I think that's the area that the legislature can work on the most.
And I would concur. As chair of banking and finance for the Senate, we held a hearing with EDD and Bank of America, specifically looking at the debit card challenges and fraud that's happened to the tune of billions of dollars in the state of California. So I think, you know, what happens, and I see this happen not just at the state level, but also with local municipalities, that very often you have competing needs. And so when you have an audit report that said that we needed to update the technology system and the computer system for the EDD department and warned us that we would not be able to keep up with a system that was inundated by, you know, with data and information and users, you know, we put it aside for 10 years over and over. And that, you know, neither Assemblymember Bennett or I were there when that first happened, but nonetheless, it kept, you know, getting extended. And so, you fast forward to 2020, when the system went from an average of, you know, 2,000 users a month to, you know, 5 million. It couldn't handle it. And so we've certainly had conversations in place. You are seeing a number of bills go through the legislature, including one that I have in terms of taking away fees when these EDD checks are cashed in different financial institutions. So you are seeing a number of bills that will go through the legislature trying to tackle the problem in pieces. It is very hard to restart the entire system when you have so many users in it at the moment. And so I think that for us, the oversight that we're trying to provide is one that also deals with direct constituent services. It's been among the top 3 issues that my office has dealt with since I was in the Assembly. And so I think that is, I think at the moment, what we can best do provide constituent service by, being another voice for our constituents who are struggling with EDD. At the legislative level, it certainly is creating different policies that will reshape how EDD, the work that EDD has done. I can tell you that we've never scrutinized the vendor that the state picks to be a partner in the EDD distribution of checks the way that we have, in this last year. And that's because we are learning what challenges the system has when there's so many users. So certainly you will see some changes, but with the hope that we will have a complete turnaround, when we have a different amount of users in the system.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Switching gears back a little bit to kind of renters and homelessness. We have a question in the chat here around what do you think state and local governments can do to increase rent to own opportunities so that the young tenants that grow up in our communities aren't priced out down the road? I know, based on some of the people that we serve, they did grow up in the Santa Barbara community, and it would appear, based on what we know, that this exact situation happened to them. They priced out and they found themselves living on our streets and in our shelters. So I think this is a really important question. So do you all have any insider thoughts on kind of how you all are approaching that from a policy perspective? Oh, Assemblymember Bennett, I think you're answering, but you're on mute.
Great. Thank you. I shut that off. I used a motor to stand up. I've been seated all day long on Zoom, so I switched to the standing mode here. Didn't want to have the motor bother you. One of the things that I'm going to do in terms of trying to approach this is to push for the idea of community land trust, where the community comes up with the land and the people only have to afford to buy the house. And then the house stays affordable because you limit how much appreciation they can get on that house. So people will be in this kind of setup. People would buy the house and perhaps it's limited to 3 or 4% appreciation. So 20 years from now, they can still build some equity up, but the house stays affordable in the long run. I'm excited about the opportunity. The places that have done that, it has worked. But if you do a community land trust, and let's say you got the community organizations and the local government, the city and the county to step forward and come up with a nice parcel of land, it wouldn't do you any good if you couldn't have that be for your existing workforce, for your existing population, or for the students that are graduating from school and want to be there in the community, or the children of people. So that's one of the exciting things that I hope I can really pull a nice package together within another year. And I'm working with Community Land Trust right now on that. So that's an example of one idea.
Thank you. And I would add that, a lot of, I get the issue. As someone who was born and raised here in this area, even thinking about how you come back to this area after, if you happen to leave, right? How you come back and how you afford it has been, I think, a question that many folks really delve into and they question. And I know a lot of the conversations around housing, and I think you're going to see this come up for folks that are following the local politics with the city council and mayor's race about, how do we get folks who want to be able to afford. And I think it's multifaceted in the sense that we have to find ways to build. And I think you just heard Assemblymember Bennett give an idea about building. I think for us, it's also thinking differently and creatively. We know that not everybody is at least, in terms of the rent to buy option, is thinking always that it has to be a home, as it, is a single story, kind of sprawled out a little bit more. We know that there is more openness to thinking about living near transportation hubs, about living in areas that have, mixed use, commercial, on one level and residential on the other. And I think that those are some of the additional considerations that we should be having. If we start to look at this from different modalities, does that then allow for these rent to own options? Does that allow for individuals who want to start somewhere to be able to buy? And so I think that that's really important. Certainly there are, first time homeowner credits that everyone talks about, but I don't know that those solve the supply problem, especially not in a market that's so expensive. Like the Central Coast, I don't think it's just the city of Santa Barbara. I think that Santa Barbara County and Ventura County are becoming more expensive for someone who's just starting out.
Thank you so much. I think that's an incredible insight and a lot of great information shared there. So I think we have time for one last question. And it's a little bit of a kind of more big picture question, but what motivates you two in the fight to end homelessness and really committing to this social issue? Assemblymember, since you're unmuted, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I was going to defer to my colleague, but I'm happy to do that. What motivates me is dealing with homelessness and dealing with affordable housing is simply part of good government. When you think about it, what do we have governments for? You have governments to try to solve the problems that individuals can't solve by themselves. That's why we collectively come together and do the national defense. But in most other first world countries, they've recognized that housing has become such a complicated issue that the government needs to help people solve that problem, except for the people that are truly fortunate, like many of us, and are able to solve ourselves. But there are many people that can't do that. And I am in government for just one reason. I really got committed to this when I joined the Board of Supervisors, and they had a huge fiscal discipline problem. And I had to do things that were very unpopular. But I said, I'm going to do the right thing, and then I'm going to sell people on it. And it wasn't popular at the time. But when it worked, and now Ventura County is in much better shape fiscally, people are supportive of the changes that we made. I want to solve this problem also, homelessness and affordable housing, because it's part of what government should do. They should be fiscally responsible. They should take care of the basic needs of their citizens. And housing, medical care, and education are three basic needs that, quite frankly, we do a very poor job of nationally in this country, with our strong emphasis on sort of individual, reliability, individuals taking care of themselves. So we are behind almost all the other first world countries in education and healthcare. But in particular, we're really seeing the crisis right now in homelessness. So it's part and parcel of good government. I like being a problem solver for good government solutions, and this is one of those big issues. So thanks for this opportunity to let me sort of be on a soapbox and share some of these things. It's been good for me to get it off my chest. Thanks.
And I think for me, I mean, the issue that I think about is I reflect a lot on not just growing up here and seeing individuals who I went to school with who find themselves unsheltered, and really, putting a face, a name, an experience to the numbers that we see. A lot of you have asked the question, does the state of California really have 53% of the unsheltered in the nation? And that statistic came straight from a HUD report in 2019. And so it came from the annual homeless assessment that they produce, the AHAR report. And so I think that it's important to understand that we all do. If you're on this Zoom right now, I know you understand the challenges. And so it's, how do we take those challenges? How do we care, but turn that care into a policy solution, into a government solution? And I think that for me is what drives me. When I was on the school board, I very often would talk to families who did not describe themselves as homeless because they lived in a car, or because they lived, in one room or in one corner of a room, with many other families. And I think about what that living experience was like, walking into the homes, talking to the families, and understanding that there is so much more that we can do for individuals in terms of helping them become sheltered, and that they have a different lived experience with a home, just like they would have a different lived experience with healthcare, with a job, and so forth. So I think that this is one of the basic elements of survival that is important to have, and I think it's important for us to also solve for it. I do want to recognize that it is among the more challenging issues to solve for. And if this was an easy thing to solve for, if the resources were there, if this was easy, we would see, I think, a different situation. But because homelessness happens for so many different reasons, we continue to tackle it from so many different angles.
Tessa, if I could just add one other comment. You asked about motivation, and as Senator Limon spoke, it reminded me. But 15 years ago, my wife and I took in a homeless Mexican immigrant family, mom, dad, and 3 kids. And 15 years later, they're still with us, but now it's mom, dad, and 4 kids. But it really has informed me more about the challenges. They thought, we didn't think they would be with us this long, but lots of good things happened, and we was able to have that happen. But it really did open my eyes to just how difficult it was for a man who was working 14-hour days full time and could not afford to house himself and his family in Ventura. So that's another personal motivation. And for those of us that are fortunate that have housing, it doesn't take very many individual reminders to really open your eyes to how tough it is out there for people.
Thanks so much for that personal reflection. I think, I think for those of us who work in this field and really are motivated to make progress on this really important social issue, I think that those stories are what drive us. It's the humanity of this issue that drives us. So thank you both for your partnership with PATH as we work to kind of support our homeless neighbors in Santa Barbara, and for all of your kind of answers tonight. I'm just going to transition it back over to Jennifer to close us out, but we really appreciated this conversation.
Thanks, Tessa.
Yes, thank you, Tessa, and thank you, Senator and Assembly Member, and I know the Congressman had to leave early. Thank you all of the attendees for joining. There was a lot of activity and interest, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions, but this is the start of a conversation. You can tell we as an organization are obviously committed to ending homelessness, and we heard some wonderful ways that we're going to be moving the needle from both the federal level and the state level today. So thank you again, all of you, for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about PATH's work in Santa Barbara community, we encourage you to follow our Facebook page, which is PATH Santa Barbara. So hope everyone has a wonderful night, and thank you again. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Jennifer.